So today we're going to dive deep into something pretty fundamental, the very nature of who you are. We're going to explore the roots of suffering and happiness through a practice that is, believe it or not, profoundly simple. Let's get into it.
You know, at the heart of this entire exploration is a technique so basic, so fundamental, you can boil it all down to just 2 words. And it's a technique that requires nothing more than your own direct experience.
And that's it. Rising, falling, just the simple physical sensation of your abdomen moving as you breathe, in and out. This right here, this is our starting point. This is the laboratory for our entire investigation.
But how? I mean, seriously, how can just watching your own breath possibly unravel the complex, messy, wonderful thing that you call you? Well, that is the big question we are going to unpack together in this explainer.
So this practice actually has a name. It's called Vipassana, which basically means insight meditation. And its foundations are built on this really radical act of simple, sustained observation.
Okay, so the core instruction, which comes from the great meditation master Mahasi Sayadaw, is to simply mentally note the rising and the falling. Now, this isn't about saying the words in your head, not really. It's about applying pure awareness. You just observe the entire arc of the breath, from the very beginning of the rise to its end, and then the start of the fall all the way to its completion. And the key is, you do it without trying to change it at all.
All right, now let's see how this whole practice expands from just the breath to the entire landscape of your mind. This is where you literally become a scientist, and your own consciousness is the lab.
So in this practice, everything you could possibly experience gets sorted into 2 basic fields. On the one hand, you've got rupa. That's all the physical stuff. The breath, a feeling of warmth, the pressure of the chair you're sitting on. And on the other hand, you've got nama, and that's all the mental stuff. Seeing, hearing, thinking, feeling, the actual acts of consciousness itself.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the practice goes way beyond the breath. Your mind is going to wander, right? It's what minds do. When it does, you don't fight it. You just gently note, wandering, wandering. If a feeling of joy pops up, you note, happy, happy. That ache in your knee, it just becomes pain, pain. Even the tiniest desire to move gets noted, wanting to change.
And this right here is just a brilliant illustration of the level of detail we're talking about. A super simple act, like shifting your leg, gets broken down into this whole sequence of observations. You actually note the intention to move before you move, then you note each part of the action itself, raising, moving, dropping, as it's happening. The goal is to create this continuous, unbroken chain of awareness. Okay, so now we get to the big pivot. We've talked about the how of the practice, but now we're getting into the really crucial why. What does all this patient, detailed observation actually show us? Well, it points directly at what Buddhist teachings say is the root of all our problems. Because as you do this, you start to notice this constant kind of needy narrator in your head, right? An I that is always at the center of the story. I am happy. I am in pain. I want this. I don't want that. But who or what actually is this I? And right here, we get to the absolute core of the whole thing. The Buddhist view is that this constant focus on I, this self-cherishing thought, is not the path to happiness. In fact, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche puts it, it's the very source of all our problems, from the tiniest irritations to our deepest suffering.
So there's a technical term for this. It's called ego grasping. And listen, this isn't about being arrogant or having a big ego in the usual sense. It's something way deeper. This instinctive assumption that there's a solid, independent, continuous me at the center of it all. The source material calls it a fundamental delusion, a totally fabricated sense of self, whose nature is basically fear and separation. And this ego grasping, it's the root of our negative emotions. These emotions, like anger or intense attachment, are described as having 2 qualities. First, they're obviously disturbing. They just rob us of our peace. But second, and this is the really subtle part, they are delusional. They're based on these completely distorted ways of seeing things, these exaggerated stories that we tell ourselves and believe are 100% true. Okay, so if this solid I is just a fabrication, a kind of delusion, how do we actually prove that to ourselves? Well, the next step is a direct investigation. We're going to go looking for this I. And the question is really simple. If this I is so real, so solid, where is it? I mean, if you had to point to it, right now, where would you point? Let's actually break down the possibilities.
I mean, think about it. Is the I your skin? Nah, that can be cut. Is it your blood? Your brain?
If you got a brain transplant, would the eye go with it? Is it your thoughts? They're changing every single second. Is it your name? Someone just gave you that. And here's the kicker. When you really, really look, you can't find this solid self in any of the parts, or even in the collection of all the parts put together.
And Lama Thubten Yeshe has this absolutely beautiful analogy for this. He says the self is like a name we give to a bubble. The bubble itself is just a temporary collection of things. Our body, our feelings, our thoughts. It definitely exists, but the name, the I, is just a label we stick on this fleeting thing. It's not some solid object inside the bubble.
And all of this searching, this deconstruction, it leads to one of the most profound and, frankly, mind-bending insights in Mahayana Buddhism, famously stated in the Heart Suture, "Form is empty, emptiness is form." What it means is that while things certainly appear, there is form, they are empty of that solid, independent, separate existence we're always projecting onto them. They exist, sure, but more like interdependent, temporary events, just like Lama Yeshe's bubble.
All right, so if being run by this mistaken, self-cherishing I is the root of all our problems, what's the alternative? I mean, what's the solution? The final part of our explainer looks at the proposed answer, a really radical shift in perspective.
So look at this. You've got two paths laid out with total clarity. Over here on one side, you have our default mode, self-cherishing. The core belief is, my happiness is what matters most. It's driven by ego, and the result is suffering. And then on the other side, you have this radical alternative, bodhicitta, which means cherishing others. The core belief is, the happiness of others is most important, and it's driven by compassion and leads to real, lasting happiness. It's a complete flip of our usual priorities. And the claim here? It's absolutely huge. Lama Zipa Rinpoche isn't just saying this is one way to be happy. He's saying it is the source of all happiness, and not just for other people, but for you too. It's this beautiful paradox. By shifting the focus from me to we ironically find the very well-being we were searching for all along.
And that brings us to our final thought, a question to just sit with. If the well-being of every single person, even the ones who really push your buttons, is fundamentally linked to your own happiness, if they are the very source from which your compassion and your joy can grow, then who is left to be your enemy?